She was just a single mom picking up her son from school, until two cops pulled her over, accused her of a crime she didn't commit, and threw her in handcuffs. But what they didn't know, her father isn't just any dad. He's one of the most feared Delta Force commanders in U.S. history. What happened next will leave you speechless. It was a hot summer afternoon in Georgia, the kind that made the roads shimmer under the sun. Kendra Williams, a 32-year-old black single mom, had just picked up her 7-year-old son, Malik, from school. The air inside the car was filled with laughter. As they sang along to Malik's favorite playlist, the windows rolled down just enough to let the breeze in. They were talking about getting ice cream on the way home. Something simple, something sweet. Kendra had worked 2 shifts at the hospital the day before and promised her son they'd have some time together today. Then came the flashing lights, red and blue strobes slicing through the afternoon sun in her rearview mirror. Kendra's heart skipped a beat. She quickly checked her speed. She wasn't speeding. Her tags were current, insurance paid, no broken taillights. She signaled and pulled over to the side of the road, putting the car in park with a deep breath. Her mind raced, trying to think of any reason why this was happening. She glanced at Malik, who had stopped singing and now looked nervous. She smiled at him to ease his worry. "It's okay, baby. Probably just a routine check." 2 white police officers exited their cruiser and approached her car, hands already resting on their holstered guns. One was tall and broad-shouldered, with mirrored sunglasses, and the other had a hard, impatient look in his eyes. The taller officer leaned down toward her window. "License and registration. Step out of the car," he barked, his voice clipped and authoritative. Kendra's eyes widened. "Excuse me, officer. What did I do wrong?" "No questions. Step out now," the second officer snapped. Malik's small hand reached for hers. He was scared. She could feel his little fingers trembling. Kendra fought to stay calm. She'd always taught Malik about staying respectful and composed in front of authority, but inside, fear simmered. She'd seen videos. She'd heard stories. This was how those terrible encounters started. She kept her hands in plain view as she slowly reached for her purse, pulling out her license and registration. "I'm not resisting," she said softly. "I'm just getting my documents." The taller officer yanked the door open and motioned her out. "You match the description of a suspect," he said, though no clear reason was given. Before she could respond, they had her out of the car, and without any formal explanation, one of them was cuffing her hands behind her back. Kendra's mouth went dry. "Please, my son is in the car. I didn't do anything. I just picked him up from school. Check the school's cameras. I can prove it." But they weren't listening. The second officer pulled Malik out of the car and told him to sit on the curb. The boy began to cry, calling for his mom. Kendra twisted her neck to see him, the steel of the handcuffs biting into her wrists. She was a nurse, a mother, a law-abiding citizen, and now she was treated like a criminal, humiliated in front of her child and a growing group of bystanders, some of whom had started filming on their phones. "Can I please make a call?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Just one call." One officer looked at her, annoyed, but nodded. "Make it quick." Kendra's fingers trembled as she dialed the only number she could think of. When the line picked up, she spoke barely above a whisper. "Dad, they've arrested me. I'm in handcuffs in front of Malik. I didn't do anything. Please, help." "Me." On the other end of the line was Colonel James Williams, her father. A retired Delta Force commander, known among elite military circles as Steel. He was a man who had led Black Ops missions in hostile territories and had negotiated with warlords. But nothing ever made him as angry or afraid as hearing the pain in his daughter's voice. "Send me your location," he said with steady calm. "Stay right there. I'm coming." 15 minutes later, a matte black SUV pulled up behind the police cruisers. Out stepped a tall man in his 60s, still built like a tank, wearing civilian clothes but carrying himself like a man who had never retired. With him were 2 men, both former operatives. The moment he stepped onto the scene, the atmosphere shifted. He walked straight toward the officers. "Who are you?" one asked, half reaching for his badge. Colonel Williams didn't answer with words. He produced a military identification card and made a call right in front of them on his secure satellite phone. Put me through to the precinct commander. Within minutes, another squad car arrived. A senior officer emerged, one who clearly recognized Colonel Williams and quickly assessed the mistake. I am so sorry, sir. We didn't realize. You shouldn't need to realize who someone is to treat them with basic human decency, Colonel Williams replied, voice low and sharp. You detained my daughter in front of her child without any real cause. Did you even verify the time she left her son's school? The officers looked at each other, caught off guard. No one had checked. They had assumed. Kendra was uncuffed without another word. Malik ran into her arms, still crying. Colonel Williams kneeled beside them, placing a reassuring hand on his grandson's shoulder. You're okay now, he said. I'm here. Later that evening, the video of the incident went viral. The internet exploded with outrage, praise for Colonel Williams, and support for Kendra and Malik. The department issued a formal apology. An internal investigation was launched, and both officers were suspended, but the damage was already done. Malik would always remember the fear. Kendra would always remember the shame, and Colonel Williams would always remember the rage of knowing his daughter had to call in a military legend just to be treated like a human being. He didn't want fame. He didn't want headlines. He just wanted justice, and justice finally was coming. It all unraveled so quickly that Kendra barely had time to process what was happening. Moments ago, she and her son Malik were happily riding home, singing along to the radio, and now she was standing on the side of the road in handcuffs. Her pulse raced, not just from fear, but from sheer disbelief. One of the officers, the taller one with the square jaw and sunglasses, claimed that her vehicle, a silver Honda Civic, matched the description of a car used in a robbery just a few miles away. Kendra stood frozen for a second, trying to comprehend the words. What robbery? She asked, her voice shaking. I just picked up my son from school 10 minutes ago. You can call the school, check the cameras, ask the teachers. He was in class all day. I've been at work. I can prove it. But the officer wasn't listening. He didn't ask for an alibi. He didn't request documentation. Instead, he radioed in a vague confirmation, something about bringing in a suspect for questioning. Before Kendra could even finish her sentence, the second officer had already pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Turn around, he ordered. Wait, what? She asked, backing away slightly. Please, no, I haven't done anything. My son's right there. He's scared. The officer didn't respond. He grabbed her arm and spun her around, locking the cold metal cuffs onto her wrists. Malik started, screaming, his tiny voice cracking. Mommy! Mommy, what's happening? Stay where you are, kid, the other officer barked, motioning Malik to sit down on the curb. The sidewalk was scorching. The boy flinched as he sat, hot concrete searing through his shorts. He looked up at the officers with wide, terrified eyes, tears rolling down his cheeks. Kendra turned her head as far as she could, trying to keep him in view. Please, she begged, her voice cracking now. He's only 7. He's never seen anything like this before. Don't do this in front of him. Just check the school. Please. But they didn't listen. More than anything, it was the helplessness that stung. Kendra was used to handling pressure. As a nurse, she'd been in operating rooms and emergency situations, staying strong through chaos. But this was different. This wasn't an emergency she could fix. This wasn't medicine or logic. This was something else. Something darker. Something she'd always feared might happen but prayed never would. By now a small crowd had gathered. A few people took out their phones, recording the scene. Someone asked, "What did she do?" But no answer came. The officers didn't want to talk. They were more focused on looking in control. Kendra stood trembling, trying to maintain her dignity, even with her hands cuffed behind her back and her son sobbing on the sidewalk. Every instinct screamed at her to scream back, to resist, to shout that she was innocent, but she knew how that story usually ended. So instead, she stood as tall as she could and repeated, "I am not resisting. Please call a supervisor. I didn't do anything wrong," over and over. Her voice trembled, but she made it clear. She was trying to stay calm, not for herself, but for Malik. Then, something clicked in her memory. Her dad. His voice echoed in her mind. "If you're ever in real trouble and things go sideways, call me, no matter what." Kendra hadn't spoken to him that morning. He was usually checking in, always watching over her and Malik, though often from afar. Her father wasn't just any protective dad. He was a man trained to deal with high-pressure situations, a man people didn't question. Colonel James Steele Williams wasn't just retired military. He was Delta Force, former commander, Special Operations, Elite Tier 1 unit. A man with clearance levels most people didn't even know existed. He had led hostage rescues in foreign countries, disarmed terrorists, and negotiated during tense standoffs. But the most important thing he had ever done in her eyes was being her dad. Kendra raised her head. "Can I make one call?" she asked, steadying her voice as best she could. "Please, just one." "That's my right." The taller officer looked at her for a second and grunted. "Make it quick." Her fingers shook as she tapped her phone screen with her cuffed hands, barely managing to hit the correct contact. The call rang once, then twice. Her father answered on the third. "Kendra?" His deep voice was immediately alert. "Dad?" she whispered. "They've arrested me, in front of Malik. They said I matched a robbery suspect. I didn't do anything. I swear. They won't listen. They've got me in handcuffs, and Malik is sitting on the curb. He's crying." There was a pause. She could hear the shift in his voice before he even spoke. "Where are you?" he asked. Calm, controlled, but under the surface, she could feel it. The fire. She gave him the cross streets, the closest landmark. "I'm on my way," he said. "Don't say anything else. I've got this." The line went dead. Kendra took a breath. Just knowing her father was coming made something inside her unclench. She didn't know exactly what he would do, but she knew that once he arrived, nothing would be the same. Behind her, the officers resumed their chatter, thinking they'd made a routine stop. They had no idea who was now en route, as Kendra stood. In the heat, wrists sore, heart aching for her son, she knew one thing for sure. They had picked the wrong mother. Because her father was the last man they ever wanted to meet in a situation like this. And he was on his way. They let her use her phone, though reluctantly. One of the officers held it out as if he were doing her a favor. But the cold metal of the handcuffs around her wrists told a different story. Kendra took the phone, hands trembling, fingers awkwardly maneuvering the touchscreen. Her heart was pounding, her vision blurred slightly from the pressure and panic. She managed to find his name, Dad, and tapped the screen. It rang once, twice. Then a familiar voice answered. "Hello, Dad." Her voice cracked, and she took a breath to steady herself. "They've arrested me in front of Malik. They say I robbed someone. I didn't. I swear I didn't. They won't listen." There was a pause on the line. Not long, but long enough for Kendra to feel the shift. The calm, the drop in temperature. Then came a voice that she knew as both her protector and the man that others feared, deep, controlled, and dangerously focused. "Where are you?" Kendra quickly gave him the location, the intersection, the name of the school down the road, the gas station across the street. She could hear him moving in the background, keys grabbing, door shutting, an engine starting. "I'm coming," he said. "Don't say another word to anyone. Just wait." The line disconnected. She handed the phone back to the officer without saying anything. Her stomach churned with adrenaline and fear. Her eyes scanned the street, looking back toward Malik, still sitting on the curb, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. It was the image of her child, afraid, confused, alone, that kept her from completely falling apart. The officers didn't seem concerned. They were talking quietly now, occasionally glancing at Kendra as if she were just another routine suspect. They still hadn't checked her alibi, hadn't asked for more details. It was all about control, not truth, not justice. But what they didn't know was that Kendra's father was not a man you wanted to cross. He wasn't just someone who would show up and talk loudly. He was Colonel James Steele Williams, a 25-year veteran of the U.S. Army's elite Delta Force. He had led classified missions into war zones, pulled hostages from terrorist compounds, and trained special ops units in countries most Americans couldn't find on a map. His name didn't appear in the media often, but in military circles, it carried weight. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. His presence alone shifted the air in any room he entered. And now, he was on his way, with the fury of a father and the precision of a soldier. Exactly 14 minutes later, a matte black SUV pulled up behind the police cruisers. It was sleek, powerful, the kind of vehicle that didn't look out of place in a motorcade. The engine shut off, and the driver's door opened. Out stepped a tall man in his late 50s, close-cropped silver hair, dark sunglasses hiding the storm in his eyes. He wore a simple black shirt, jeans, and combat boots. Nothing flashy, but everything. About him said, authority. Two other men followed him out of the SUV, former Delta Force teammates. No uniforms, no guns drawn, just calm, quiet intensity. The officers looked up, puzzled. One of them instinctively placed a hand on his holster. "Who are you?" the taller cop asked, trying to sound confident. Colonel Williams didn't respond. Immediately, he reached into his wallet and pulled out an ID, military grade, high-level clearance. The kind that made trained law enforcement look twice. Then, without waiting for permission or acknowledgement, he pulled out a small secure satellite phone, pressed a sequence of buttons, and put it to his ear. "This is Colonel James Williams. I need to speak with the precinct commander. Immediately." The officers hesitated. Something in the tone of this man, something in the calm way he stood, unshaken by the tension, made them nervous. What's this about?" The second officer tried, but Colonel Williams didn't even glance at him. He was already talking to someone on the other end of the line. "Yes, I'm on site. My daughter, Kendra Williams, has been detained without cause. I'm standing next to the arresting officers. I expect immediate oversight. This is a civil rights issue and an abuse of authority." Pause. "Good, I'll..." "Wait." He ended the call. "Uncuff her," he said quietly, to no one in particular, but the tone left no room for argument. The taller officer hesitated, looking at his partner. "We have procedure." Colonel Williams finally looked at him, directly. "You had procedure when you put your hands on a nurse and mother without confirming your facts. Now, you'll follow mine. Or the fallout from this won't end at your precinct. It'll reach your badge, your pension, and the mayor's office." The officer swallowed, his jaw tightening. Slowly, he stepped toward Kendra and removed the cuffs. She rubbed her wrists, finally breathing, though still shaking. Malik saw her and ran from the sidewalk, tears streaking his face. She knelt down, hugging him tightly, whispering into his ear, "It's okay, baby. Grandpa's here." Within minutes, another squad car arrived. A senior ranking officer stepped out. One look at Colonel Williams and his whole posture changed. "Colonel Williams," the commander said, "I had no idea." "You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat their daughter and grandson with respect," he interrupted, firmly. "This could have gone much differently. You are lucky it didn't." He turned to his daughter. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly, tears welling up. "I am now." Colonel Williams placed a protective arm around her shoulders. Then, quietly and methodically, he began filing a formal complaint right there on the sidewalk, dictating every detail to the precinct commander. Dates, times, badge numbers. He wasn't there for revenge. He was there for accountability. And for the first time that afternoon, the officers realized they had made a very big mistake. Within minutes, a marked squad car pulled up to the chaotic scene, tires crunching against the gravel as it stopped beside the other police vehicles. The door opened, and out stepped a higher-ranking officer, a man in his late 40s with a star on his chest and urgency in his stride. He surveyed the situation quickly. Uniformed officers, a small crowd, a woman being uncuffed, and a tall, broad-shouldered man in black with an unmistakable command presence. His eyes landed on Colonel Williams, and his expression changed instantly. Recognition dawned like lightning. This wasn't just a concerned parent. This was him, Colonel James Steele Williams. The name carried weight in certain circles, especially among law enforcement and military ranks. The commander had heard of him. Everyone had. The man who had led international hostage rescues, trained elite squads, and advised federal intelligence on counter-terror strategies. He wasn't just respected, he was revered. The commander's voice trembled with a mix of surprise and immediate de-escalation. "Sir?" I had no idea. Colonel Williams didn't let him finish. "You don't need to know who I am to treat a black woman and her child with basic human respect," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "She told you where she'd been. She offered evidence. Did anyone bother to verify it? Did you check the school's surveillance footage? Did you call her workplace? Or did you just see a black woman in a car with her child and decide she was guilty until proven innocent?" The commander opened his mouth and closed it again. The two officers who had made the arrest, now visibly pale, stood frozen. The one who had cuffed Kendra looked like he wanted to melt into the sidewalk. We thought..." The chur officer began, voice shaky, eyes darting from the colonel to his partner. "You thought wrong," Colonel Williams cut in, voice stern and unwavering. "And worse, you acted without restraint, without empathy, and without basic due diligence. You humiliated her in front of her son. You put a child on a scorching sidewalk. Do you have any idea what kind of trauma that causes? Do you realize what it means for a 7-year-old boy to see his mother thrown in handcuffs like a criminal for doing absolutely nothing?" Silence. Heavy, stifling silence. The civilians watching from the sidewalk, phones still recording, were dead quiet now. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Colonel Williams took a slow step forward, not in aggression, but in command. The energy shifted. "The officers weren't in charge anymore, he was. I trained men to move through war zones with more discipline and compassion than what I just saw here," he said coldly. "You've lost the trust of this community because you act like this is a battlefield. It's not. These are citizens, mothers, children." He looked toward Malik, who was still crouched on the edge of the sidewalk, arms wrapped around his knees, face streaked with tears and sweat. The boy was shaking, small, scared, and no longer able to understand why the people with the badges, who were supposed to protect him, had treated his mom like an enemy. Colonel Williams pointed at him without breaking eye contact with the officers. "Get that boy off the concrete, now!" The officer who had spoken before moved quickly, almost stumbling as he went to help, but Kendra was already moving. The handcuffs had just come off. She didn't wait. She rushed to her son, dropped to her knees, and opened her arms. "Malik," she called. He sprang up and ran into her, sobbing. She held him tightly, cradling his head against her chest, whispering soothing words through her own tears. She didn't look at the officers, didn't speak to them. Her silence was louder than any words. The officer who had cuffed her stepped forward. His face was twisted with a mixture of regret and panic. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. We were just following." Kendra didn't respond. She stood up, Malik clinging to her hip, and turned her back to him. Her shoulders were stiff, her head high, but her eyes told the story. Heartbreak, exhaustion, rage barely held together by maternal strength. Colonel Williams turned toward the commander. "You'll be hearing from my legal team, the local council, and likely the DOJ. I want body cam footage secured. I want a full incident report. I want the names of everyone involved in this stop, and I want them tonight. If any part of this disappears, I'll treat it as a cover-up." The commander nodded quickly, sweat forming at his temples. "Yes, sir. Of course, sir." Colonel Williams stepped closer. His voice dropped a tone, colder now, quiet enough only the commander could hear. "You got lucky today. I'm not a man who reacts emotionally, but make no mistake, if my grandson had been touched, if my daughter had been harmed, you'd be dealing with federal intervention by now." He stepped back, took a deep breath, and turned toward his daughter. "Let's go," he said gently. "You and Malik need to get home. I'll take care of the rest." Kendra nodded, still holding her son close. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was clear. "Thank you, Dad." They walked back toward the black SUV together, Colonel Williams placing a steadying hand on her back. The crowd parted without being asked. The officers stood silently, unsure of what to do, stripped of authority, left to reckon with the consequences of their actions. As they drove away, Malik finally looked up from his mother's arms and whispered, "Is it over?" Kendra kissed his forehead. "It's over, baby. Grandpa made sure of that." Behind them, the flashing lights faded into the distance, but the memory wouldn't. Not for Malik, not for Kendra, and not for the officers who learned that day. Some people may be quiet, but that doesn't mean they're powerless, especially when they're protected by someone who's feared for all the right reasons. That evening, as the sun set and the sky glowed with the final blush of daylight, the story began to ripple across the internet like a wildfire. It started with one video, a bystander's shaky phone recording showing Kendra being handcuffed beside her terrified son, followed by the unmistakable moment when a tall, calm, commanding man stepped out of a black SUV and changed everything. Within hours, it was everywhere. The caption beneath the video read, "Cops harass black single mom until her dad shows up, and he's not just anyone." What followed was a flood of reactions, reposts, and commentary from people across the country. Thousands commented in awe and outrage. "This is why you never mess with a soldier's family. That boy will grow up knowing his granddad is a real-life superhero. She shouldn't have needed a powerful dad to be treated fairly. That's the real issue." Some praised Colonel Williams as a hero. Others pointed out the painful truth that justice shouldn't require military credentials to be taken seriously. Civil rights advocates shared the video with hashtags calling for reform. Local news picked it up first, then national outlets. Within 24 hours, the story had gone global. Kendra stayed off her phone most of that night. She was emotionally drained. Malik had cried himself to sleep, still shaken. Her father sat silently in the living room, his back straight, eyes watching. The front door, not out of fear, but out of instinct. The protector in him never truly rested. When the media frenzy began, Kendra knew what was coming. But Colonel Williams? He didn't care about the spotlight. He wasn't interested in the comments, the likes, or the viral praise. The only thing he cared about was justice. The very next morning, he filed a formal complaint with the department. Not a simple one-page grievance either. It was a thorough, precise, and well-documented account of everything that had transpired, complete with timestamps, badge numbers, witness names, and demands for accountability. He also requested that the department release the body cam footage and dashboard recordings from the officers involved. He was professional, but firm. No threats. Just a clear signal that this would not be swept under the rug. A few days later, the truth came out. The actual suspect in the robbery, the one whose vehicle matched Kendra's, had been apprehended 3 hours before she was pulled over. The officers had no legal reason to stop her at all. No active BOLO, no matching plate, no probable cause. What they did have was a gut assumption, one that had led to humiliation and trauma for a mother and her child. The city's response was slow at first. Public officials offered statements of concern and promised an internal review. But as the public outcry grew and media coverage intensified, they were forced to act. A week after the incident, the mayor issued a formal apology to Kendra and her family. The 2 officers involved were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Their actions were not only scrutinized, they became a case study in what not to do in law enforcement interactions. The police department, under pressure, promised to review its training programs and protocols for stops involving children and unverified claims. Malik, meanwhile, had stopped sleeping through the night. He woke from nightmares, sometimes crying, sometimes silent and withdrawn. Kendra noticed he didn't want to ride in the car anymore, especially when he saw police cruisers on the road. She found a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma, and together they began the slow work of healing his small but shaken spirit. Kendra herself didn't stay quiet. What began as a traumatic incident evolved into something else, something powerful. She was asked to speak at town halls, invited to share her story on local talk shows, and she did. Not for fame, not for sympathy, but because she knew there were other mothers out there who wouldn't have a Colonel Williams to call. Women who would have suffered in silence, whose children would carry unspoken fear for the rest of their lives. She became an advocate, a voice for the voiceless. She spoke not just about what happened to her, but about the system that allowed it to happen. She called for better police training, community accountability, and more empathy in enforcement. She pushed for policy change and partnered with organizations working to reform how police interact with communities of color. People listened because her story was real, because Malik's face, trembling on the curb, had touched hearts around the world, and because her strength wasn't in her anger, but in her refusal to let silence win. As for Colonel Williams, he returned to his quiet retirement, back to his modest home, his early morning runs, his garden, and the dog he'd trained like a soldier. He didn't speak to the press. He didn't post anything online. He didn't need to. But in one rare public statement released through a veterans organization, he said this: "I didn't raise my voice that day because I didn't need to. My actions spoke loud enough. But let me be clear, my daughter didn't need a Delta Force commander to protect her. She needed decent police officers to do their job. Until that happens, we're not done." And with that, he disappeared from the headlines, but not from the memory of what he'd done. Because in the end, the story wasn't just about a soldier saving his family. It was about the truth he left behind, a truth that resonated louder than any title, louder than any rank. Justice shouldn't depend on who your father is. It should depend on who you are, and every mother and child deserves that respect. What did you think of this powerful story? Let us know in the comments below. If this moved you, be sure to like the video. And if you want more true, inspiring, and eye-opening stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, your voice matters.